Chapter are 5 functions. 1. Outline definition of functions, function arguments and parameter calling by values and reference recursive functions. 2. 3. 4. 2. Definition of functions in C++. A function is a group of statements that is given a name, and which can be called from some point of the program. Functions allow to structure programs in segments of code to perform individual tasks. The most common syntax to define a function is type name, parameter 1, parameter 2, statements where type is the type of the value returned by the function. Name is the identifier by which the function can be called. Parameters, as many as needed. Each parameter consists of a type followed by an identifier, with each parameter being separated from the next by a comma. 3. Definition of functions. Once the function is defined, the next step is using it by calling a function. Remember that no matter the order in which they are defined, a C++ program always starts by calling main. In fact, main is the only function called automatically, and the code in any other function is only executed if its function is called from main, directly or indirectly. The final statement within the function is a return statement. The return ends the called function ask, and returns the control back to the point where the function was called, in most cases, to function main. At this precise moment, the program resumes its course on main, returning exactly at the same point at which it was interrupted by the call to addition. 4. Definition of functions. Example function hashtag include data streamed using namespace std, int addition, int a, int b, int r equals a plus b, return r, int main, int z equals addition, 5, 3, could lt. The result is lt/z. A function can actually be called multiple times within a program, and its argument is naturally not limited just to literals. 5. Functions with no type. These avoid the syntax shown above for functions. Type name, argument 1, argument 2, statements requires declaration to begin with the type. This is the type of the value returned by the function. But what if the function does not need to return a value? In this case, the type to be used is void, which is a special type to represent the absence of value. For example, a function that simply prints a message may not need to return any value. 6. Functions. The return value of main. You may have noticed that the return type of main isn't, but most examples in this and earlier chapters did not actually return any value from main. Well, there is a catch. If the execution of main ends normally without encountering a return statement, the compiler assumes the function ends with an implicit return statement, return 0. Note that this only applies to function main for historical reasons. All other functions with a return type shall end with a proper return statement that includes a return value, even if this is never used. 7. Functions arguments and parameter. A function declaration might have parameters for the entire operation of the function. The parameters in the function declaration have a clear correspondence to the arguments passed in the function call. For example, in addition, int, we are passing values to the addition operation with two parameters called x and y. Parameter's variable in the declaration of function. Argument is the actual value of this variable that gets passed to function. 8. Arguments passed by value and by reference. In most case, arguments have always been passed by value. This means that, when calling a function, what is passed to the function are the values of these arguments on the moment of the call, which are copied into the variables represented by the function parameters. For example, take int equals 5, y equals 3, z equals addition, x, y. In this case, function addition is passed 5 and 3, which are copies of the values of Sandy, respectively. 9. Arguments passed by value and by reference, but in certain cases, though, it may be useful to access an external variable from within a function. To do that, arguments can be passed by reference, instead of by value. To gain access to its arguments, the function declares its parameters as references. In C++, references are indicated with an ampersand, and, following the parameter type, as in the parameters taken by duplicate in the example above. 10. Arguments passed by value and by reference. For example, the following code shows function declaration with parameters #, references. Hashtag include LT streamed using namespace std, void duplicate, int and a, int and b, int and c, a equals 2, b equals 2, c asterisk equals 2, int main, int x equals 1, y equals 3, z equals 7, duplicate, x, y, z, could lt x equals lt x lt y equals lt y lt z equals lt return 0, 11. In default values in parameters C++, functions can also have optional parameters, for which no arguments are required in Thecal. For example, a function with 3 parameters may be called with only 2. For this, the function shall include a default value for its last parameter, which is used by the function when called with fewer arguments. For example, int divide, int a, int b equals 2, int r equals a/b, return, r. The above function pass only one variable value, i.ea. The second variable b has a default value, thus we don't need to pass value to it. 12. In default values in parameters the code above, the function can be called as divide 12. In this case, the function assumes the second parameter to be 2. Notice the function definition, which declares its second parameter as int b equals 2. Therefore, the result is 6. In another call, the function may be called as divide 20,4. Thecal passes 2 arguments to the function. Therefore, the default value for b, int b equals 2, is ignored, and b takes the value passed as argument, that is 4, yielding a result of 5. 13. Recursive function recursivity is the property that functions have to be called by themselves. It is useful for some tasks, such as sorting elements, or calculating the factorial of numbers. For example, in order to obtain the factorial of a number, n, the mathematical formula would be, n equals n asterisk, n1, asterisk, n2, asterisk, n3, asterisk 1. More concretely, 5 factorial of 5 would be 5 equals 5 asterisk 4 asterisk 3 asterisk 2 asterisk 1 equals 120, and a recursive function to calculate this in C++ could be 14. Recursive function / factorial calculator hashtag include LT is streamed using namespace std, long factorial, long a, if, a gt1, return, a asterisk factorial, a1, else return 1, int main, long number equals 9, could lt number lt equals lt factorial, number, return 0, 15. Recursive function. The function factorial we included a call to itself, but only if the argument passed was greater than 1, since, otherwise, the function would perform an infinite recursive loop, in which once it arrived to 0, it would continue multiplying by all the negative numbers, probably provoking a stack overflow at some point during runtime. 16.